from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast Network, and I'm Reverend Charles Harrison. And on today's show, we're going to talk about a reoccurring problem in this city of Indianapolis. We had another incident this past Saturday, downtown Indianapolis, with hundreds of unsupervised teens. Hello, this is Reverend Charles Harrison, and this is my podcast, Real Talk. And today, we're going to be talking about a reoccurring problem that we continue to have in this city of Indianapolis, and it is with our teens. This has been a problem going all the way back to when I first started getting involved in trying to address the issue of youth urban violence in Indianapolis. And here we go again. Not long ago, we had an incident downtown involving teens. The city ended up the police department establishing a curfew for teens, particularly that age group from about 12 to 17 years old. This past Saturday, we had another situation downtown. And let me talk a little bit about what happened downtown on Saturday based on the information that I have. We had 400 unsupervised teens roaming downtown Indianapolis. Doesn't that really sound familiar? For those of us who live in Indianapolis, doesn't that sound familiar? Going all the way back to really 1999, when I first started getting involved with the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition, one of our first assignments, not just patrolling the neighborhoods, but one of our other assignments was helping out downtown with all of the unsupervised teens. Back then, we were trying to get teens from the mall to the bus stop, which was by the state capitol building on Capitol. And there would be 200, 300, 400 teens and sometimes adolescents. We're trying to get on the bus to different sides of the city, getting them kids back home without having a fight. And back in those days, what we were most concerned about was teenagers getting into a big fight. But on this Saturday, we had 400 unsupervised teens roaming Indianapolis this past Saturday. There were shots fired. There were robberies, according to what we've been told. 3 juveniles were arrested for unlawful possession of guns. There was also on Saturday attempted break-ins of police cars. Are you kidding me? The kids now are breaking into police cars. What do you want out of the police car? Are you in the police car now because you're trying to steal guns or what? It got so bad with all of these juveniles downtown on Saturday night, 400 unsupervised juveniles, that businesses locked their doors. Some of the businesses downtown ended up closing up because of the kids, the unsupervised kids. Not long ago, we were just talking about this issue downtown in Indianapolis. With all of these unsupervised kids, 400 of them downtown on a Saturday night, and this continues to be the problem. All of this happened before the curfew. So the kids are now aware of the curfew downtown. So what they did was, understanding that the city has a curfew now, these kids are smart. They understand what's going on. So what the kids are doing now is they're doing what they're down there to do before the curfew. So since you're going to establish a curfew, we're now going to work around the curfew. So as INPD and the community has put a curfew downtown, the kids said, well, we're going to adjust to your curfew. It's not going to stop us from coming downtown. We're just going to adjust to the curfew. And the things that we were doing before you put the curfew in are the things that we're still going to do, even with the curfew in there. The question becomes, this is a 25-year problem. Years ago, under the Goldsmith, the Peterson, and the Ballard administrations, they would turn to the community for help. A lot of times that help would come from people like myself. The Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition, along with other community groups, Ogen Williams, who was at that time, who was the executive director of the Christamore House. He was very involved in the West Side Ministers in the Hallville area. Ogen Williams, Rev Charles Harrison with 10-Point and the 10-Point Pastors. And then we would bring in other groups, and we would flood downtown with ministers and members of our congregation and anti-violence groups, because the kids that are downtown are the same kids that are in the neighborhood. So we understood that if we were going to go downtown with all of these different ministers and anti-violence groups and community groups, that we were probably going to know these kids, because these were the same kids that we were dealing with in the neighborhoods. So as we went down there, we started recognizing kids. We started recognizing kids that were part of gangs, that were part of neighborhood cliques, that were individuals that were from the neighborhoods where either our church was from or where our anti-violence groups started operating. Some of us pastors started noticing youth members of our church, and we knew their parents. And because of the kind of relationships that we already had in place as community leaders, as clergy, as churches, as anti-violence groups, then we were able to interact with those kids in a way that we were able to get those kids to not misbehave. And we did it in such an effective way because the kids knew that we were down there, that pastors down there, or Rev Harrison and 10-Point was down there, or Ogen Williams and the Christamore House, or the West Side Community Ministers, or Resurrection Community Partners. They understood that all of these groups were down there. Byron Austin would Stop the Violence. All of us was down there. So eventually what the kids did, because we were down there in partnership with the city and INPD, the kids stopped coming down there because they knew that we were not going to tolerate their misbehavior. Not only that, we were prepared to call out the parents on TV. And what would happen is that when all of us would go downtown, then the kids would relocate. They would find another spot to go to. Normally that was either Castleton Mall or they would go out to Broad Ripple. Where we would go, they would adjust. And when we put pressure on them, they then would go someplace else. We have a problem now in the city that is much different from what it was 25 years ago. 25 years ago, we did not have to deal with a large number of kids carrying guns that they were not lawfully able to possess. And what we have seen, particularly over the last 5 to 10 years, is a proliferation of guns in the hands of teens, as young as 12 years old, as old as 17. And then you have the young adults, that 18 and over crowd. And you have all of these kids now downtown now bringing guns. You have individuals who say they have them for their protection. You have individuals who are cliques. You have individuals who may be belonging to gangs. And too often when they interact with one another, if there's some kind of conflict, then that's where we may have shots fired, or we may have individuals involved in some kind of shooting where someone has been shot or injured. And we have had people over the years shot and killed, particularly around the canal. In 2019, we had 6 individuals shot in front of or just the Circle Center Mall. These kids are loaded. They're bringing their guns. So the problem is that you not only have all of these unsupervised teens downtown, but some of those teens are coming down with guns. Now, we had some kind of controversy here in the city the other day with one of the news stations and statements that Chief Bailey made concerning what happened. Chief Bailey advised many of the clergy in the city who have been working with him, or at least being in conversation with him, about how do we address the issue of juvenile violence in Indianapolis. He briefed us on what happened Saturday downtown. We understand that 3 individuals were arrested with guns. But there were other things that happened down there. So the question became, how many youth are down there with guns? I want to say this because I am on the streets normally 3 or 4 nights a week. I'm out with the 10-point OGs, and I'm normally out there, so I have a good idea what's going on in the streets. I know a lot of these kids. I know what I see. A lot of times I see these kids, they have guns in their pocket or in their waistband. A lot of times they will have an extended magazine, clip, whatever you want to call it. And these kids are roaming the neighborhoods. This is not what I've seen 25 years ago. 25 years ago, normally when we encountered kids 10-point on the streets, if you encountered a group of 7 kids on the streets, we may encounter, of that 7, 2 of those kids may have had guns. I'm talking about juveniles. Today, when we encounter that same group of 7, at least 4 or 5 of those kids have guns, if not all 7 of those kids have guns. The problem is these younger teens today have no conflict resolution skills. So when they get into an argument or beef with one another, or maybe a group of teens see another group of teens that may have done something to someone, and they're going to respond with retaliation. Or these fights and arguments now lead into gun violence. That's the reality of what we're dealing with. So now the same individuals that are creating havoc in the neighborhood, these are the same individuals that are now downtown on Saturday night. And now we're asking law enforcement basically now to babysit these unsupervised teens and sometimes adolescents. Well, that's not the job of law enforcement, to babysit teenagers. And it's really an almost impossible job to do, because it is setting IMPD up for there to be some kind of incident, an altercation that takes place between either a teen or a group of teens and law enforcement. And if someone is hurt and injured or shot and killed, then all of the blame is going to go toward IMPD. That's the reality of it. So you're putting them in a very difficult situation in trying to address a problem that has been dealt with over the years. But let me say this, but because of politics in the city, what used to work in keeping those kids from coming downtown in large numbers, well, we're not doing most of that anymore. Why? Because politics got in the way in this city. I think there are individuals in this city, particularly some of the older leaders like myself, who understand how to do this thing. I'm not as young as I used to be. I can't do some of the things that I used to do. My organization now, 10 Point now on the weekends on Saturday night are in these neighborhoods trying to keep the peace. For us, we do 9 hotspot areas. There are other groups that are out in other areas trying to address the violence that we're seeing in the neighborhoods. I'm not for sure how IMPD is going to handle this without the community being involved, because legally, I'm not for sure what they can do legally before curfew hours to address hundreds of unsupervised youth. This is a bigger problem that we need to address in Indianapolis. If you don't address it, the kids are not going to stop coming downtown. And eventually, something bad is going to happen. If we don't address this problem, something bad is going to happen. Those kids are not afraid to pull those guns out. They're not afraid to use them anywhere. So they would not be afraid to use those guns downtown in a crowd of people to fire shots at whoever they're trying to shoot at. And sadly, some innocent juveniles or adults could get hit by a bullet or bullets. So this is something that we cannot ignore. This is something that all of us have to be involved in. I just have a couple of questions. One of the things is, I think we certainly have to get the city violence interrupters and their violence reduction staff involved. My understanding is that there's about 50 of them. This is a way that we can deploy those individuals who work for the city as violence interrupters or violence reduction staff to engage our young people that are coming downtown in these large numbers. 10 Point and other groups used to do that when we had 3,000 to 5,000 youth coming downtown for Indiana Black Expo. It was the work of anti-violence groups and IMPD that stopped 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 young people hanging out, walking around the Hyatt Regency in front of the entryway of the mall and Steak and Shake. Within a couple years, we stopped that. We wouldn't let the kids just hang out if they were going to be down there. We had people deployed everywhere. We kept them moving. They could not just stop and hang out. We kept them moving around the Hyatt Regency Mall. We wouldn't let them hang out in front of the mall. We wouldn't let them hang out in front of the Steak and Shake. And after about 2 hours of them walking just around the downtown area, many of them got tired. And because both law enforcement and anti-violence groups, clergy, would not let these kids just hang out, eventually they left. They understood that we were not going to allow them just to hang out downtown. If they were going to be downtown, they were going to keep moving or go someplace, and that's how we dealt with it. We also called out parents. And we said to parents, we're not trying to prevent your children from coming downtown, but if they come downtown, they need to come downtown with you. Or you need to send them with some responsible adult. It is not the job of clergy and community groups, anti-violence groups, to babysit your children. If you're going to allow them to come downtown and hang out on a Saturday night, whether it's for Indiana Black Expo or any other night downtown on Saturday night, then you need to come with them. There needs to be some accountability here for parents, because you cannot allow them to get on the bus to come downtown or to ride with some friend to come downtown, and you're not responsible for the behavior of your children. I have 2 teenage children. I have an 18-year-old son and a 17-year-old daughter. My son's about ready to turn 19 years old next month. Me and my wife, Fawn, are responsible for our kids. So if they do something and get jammed up downtown or misbehave in a way that behave in a way that is inappropriate, then not only is law enforcement have the right to deal with them, their parents, me and my wife, are going to deal with them. It would probably be better for law enforcement to deal with them than what they know is going to happen at home when me and their mother deal with them. My kids know you don't go anywhere and embarrassing me. My son just got into trouble not long ago. He's still on punishment. We're not going to tolerate that. And parents, you shouldn't tolerate your children from going downtown and acting out. Matter of fact, let me go a little deeper. If you are a parent, you ought not to have a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16-year-old, or 17-year-old in your house. And even if you have an 18-year-old that's living in your house that is carrying an unlawful weapon, or what some people remind me of is not the weapon that's unlawful, but it's the possession of it. You ought to know that as a parent. You ought to know whether or not your child is carrying a gun and bringing that gun in your household. Our children know that we search the room. That's not their room. They're living in our house. Because they're living in our house, that's our house, and your room is our room. So we're going to go through your things to make sure that you're not bringing a weapon in this house. Not only that, I'm checking out who your friends are. Because I don't want you hanging with the wrong people. And there have been times I've said something to my son about who he was hanging with. Well, because I do 10-point and I'm out in the streets, I know someone who's out there doing what is wrong. Some of the kids I recognize. INPD should not be worrying about a large number of kids out of that 400 unsupervised youth that are carrying guns downtown. There has to be some accountability for those 3 individuals who were juveniles that were arrested with guns that they didn't lawfully have a right to possess. This is a part of the problem. Parents are not being held accountable. So what you want us to do is to bring large numbers of clergy and anti-violence groups to come down there to do what parents ought to do. Those are your children. And we got to find a way to hold parents accountable. I know some parents are going to say to me, well, Rev Harrison, I didn't know my child was going to go down there and do that. I understand that. I'm a parent too. I've had a son that just recently got in trouble for doing something he shouldn't have done. I understand that. But it should only take one time. My son understands the boundaries. And as long as he's going to be with me and live in that household, he's going to abide by the rules of me and his mother. And what we're not going to have him do is going out in public and misbehaving. I don't allow my kids to go downtown and hang out. If we go down there, we're going to go down there. Either me or your mother's going to go down there, or some responsible adult is going to be down there with you. I don't want you down there misbehaving. My parents would always tell me, and the rest of my siblings and my grandparents, that they didn't want us to do anything that reflected bad on the family. That's the way we used to do it in the community. We all understood that as kids, that we could not do anything that would reflect bad on the family. If we did, there was accountability. Parents, you just can't have children. It is not your job as a parent to be their friend. You are the parent. When they become adults and have families, then you can become their friend. But right now, you are their parent. And what these kids need is to be parented. They don't need a friend. They need a parent that helps guide and direct them. We need parents stepping up so that we don't have 400 unsupervised youth that are coming downtown creating havoc. Many of the businesses had to either lock their doors on Saturday night or close their businesses because of the young people coming down there hanging out. Now, I know some of you community activists are going to just go crazy over what I'm saying. Well, let me say this to you. If you have a solution, give us the solution, and you and your community groups are community activists, then you go down there and deal with the kids. Because I'm not against that. If you have a better solution, then let those in charge know what your solution is. Because what is not a solution is for 400 unsupervised youth to be downtown, misbehaving, roaming downtown, creating problems for a lot of people. Robbing, firing shots, and trying to break in police cars, other cars. No, that's not acceptable. No. This ain't no race issue either. It's about what's right and wrong. I don't care what color the kids are. I don't mind them going downtown if they're going to behave themselves. But since they're not behaving themselves, then now you have gotten us involved in it. So now we got to deal with the issue. Chief Chris Bailey of INPD, this should not be his issue. This is our issue. And I'm saying to the parents, before we get into any kind of solutions, you need to be parents, and you need to parent your children. Stop letting them come downtown. You know what kind of child you have in the first place. I know my children. I know what my children are capable of. And me and my wife, if we hear something about our child, we'll probably look at each other and say, yeah, that sounds like something he would do or she would do, or no, that ain't them. We know our children. And we know some of them have the tendency to misbehave. Some of you parents, you know your children are carrying guns. You know they're selling drugs. You know they're involved in cliques. Stop closing your eyes and deal with the fact that your child is on the wrong path. If you need help, reach out for help. What troubles me sometimes is that when we're on a scene where one of these children have gotten killed, then the parent comes there and talks about what a nice kid that child was. Well, I'm not saying he wasn't a nice kid, but you knew what that kid was into, which led to your child being shot or injured or shot or killed. Let's prevent that. I don't want these kids going down there and getting arrested and being a part of the system. None of us want to see that. Nor do I want to get a call that some kid has been shot and killed downtown, like we get in the neighborhoods. They're doing it downtown because we're allowing them to do it in the neighborhoods. Parents, your children are bringing guns downtown because you allow them to have guns in the neighborhood. They're acting out unlawfully downtown because you're allowing them to do it in the neighborhoods. And some of you are allowing them to do it in your homes. So if they're going to do it in your homes, then they're going to do it in the neighborhood, then they're going to do it downtown. Stop being their friend and be their parent. I don't want your kid to be a part of the system. I don't want your kid to be another victim. We shouldn't have to have these conversations every month or every other month about hundreds of unsupervised young people downtown. It's not that people don't want them to come downtown. But if they're going to come downtown, they need to behave in an appropriate way. We should not keep having these kind of conversations, year after year about this problem of all of these kids acting out downtown. But I say these are the same kids acting out in the neighborhood. That's why we have such a high level of violence in the city of Indianapolis. But because of all of these young people who have these guns, no moral compass, and no regard for the sanctity of human life. That's what we're dealing with. That's what the police are dealing with. So if Chris Bailey, chief of INPD, cracks down on the kids, then the parents and some of the community activists are going to be screaming about it. But when someone is killed down there then nothing is said. Or how good my child was. There's good in everybody. But how about being a parent that's responsible for your child so that your good child makes good choices and we can get your good child on a pathway of success in life? Being a gangster or being a thug is not on the pathway of success. And you ought not to tolerate that as a parent. There are lots of groups in this city that are doing a lot of great things that if you need help, reach out for help, parent, so that we can get your child in a good program that can help get them on the right path. But we have to stop allowing what we've seen this past Saturday downtown and what we are seeing in the neighborhoods to continue. That's unacceptable. INPD this Saturday should not have to deal with 300, 400, 500 unsupervised youth and adolescents. Unacceptable. And parents, that fall on you. We can send clergy down there, anti-violence groups down there, but what you're asking us to do is to babysit your children. That's your job. Parent them. And if you start parenting them, then we're going to have less criminal behavior from juveniles in our neighborhoods. We're going to have less shootings in our neighborhood. We're going to have fewer juveniles who are shot and injured and shot and killed in our neighborhoods. And if it's not happening in the neighborhoods, then it won't happen downtown. But we need you parents to be parents. You had the children. Now you're responsible for parenting them. You got to step up, parents. I know you don't want to hear this, but you got to step up. Because you're about to force the hand of everyone to do things that people don't want to do. They don't want to lock up these kids. They don't want to see these kids hurting each other. The police don't want to hurt none of these kids. Let's not put them in a position that might happen. You got to do your part. Search the rooms. Make sure your children don't have guns. I'm talking about the boys and the girls, because a lot of girls are carrying guns too who are juveniles. Be more responsible about who your children are hanging out with. If they're bringing stuff in your household that you didn't buy, you need to question that. Because if you didn't pay for it, who did? And if they had the money to pay for it themselves, where did they get that money from if they're not working? You cannot, as a parent, close your eyes to what is really happening with your children. I know, parents, you want the best for your children. If you want the best for your children, then you need to start being a parent. So that we won't have many more incidences where we're locking up our children and they're having a criminal record. Are we going to a scene where they have been shot or injured or shot or killed? This is Rev Harrison on Real Talk. I hope you have enjoyed it, because we're going to be real.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.